How's it going, guys? My name is John Coe. I'm an engineer at STX. I'm here today to teach you guys how to string Crux Mesh. So to string a women's mesh pocket, you're going to need a couple things. Obviously a Lacrosse head, some Crux Mesh, 2 leathers, 4 sidewall strings, 2 cross lace pieces. These are about probably 4 feet long. And then I've got 2 shooting strings, a pair of scissors, and if your strings aren't tipped, then you might need a lighter to finish those. The first part I'm going to start with is getting the leathers in, the leathers and the mesh. So I'm going to take this rough side of the leather and have it facing me. I'm going to put it through the back of the scoop, that outer one, and leathers typically come with a little die cut hole. I'm just going to use the very first one. But before I thread this through, I'm going to actually capture the mesh. And so when you're looking at a piece of mesh, there's going to be 2 distinct rows. There's going to be a row of 7, and then there's going to be a row of 6. We're going to work with, for the top row, the row of 7. I'm going to take that, I'm going to fold it back on itself. And believe it or not, there's actually a top side and a bottom side to mesh. You want, when it's facing the back of the stick, the mesh to curl off. That'll put the rougher side against where the ball would lie. And so I'm going to take that top row of 7, fold 1 row back on itself. You see I took this top row and I folded it to the next matching row of 7. I'm going to stretch that out a little bit, and I'm now going to place this so that that folded over side is facing me, the back of the head, and I'm going to capture that first hole with the leather, and then I'm going to take the leather and put it through this die cut hole. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that on the other side. So now I've got the mesh captured by the leathers. I've got the 2 leathers still dangling. And the next thing I'm going to do is actually weave these leathers through the side of this mesh. And so like I mentioned before, there's rows of 6 and there's rows of 7. And so I'm going to start by coming in through the back side of this 7 and then come back through the front side of the next 7 and just work my way down. I'm going to keep doing that until I get towards about the length of the head. Doesn't have to be exact. You can go, once you get towards the bottom of, or towards the end of the stringing job, you can kind of modify this if you have too many rows or not enough rows. And I like to finish by coming through the back so the mesh is sticking off the back side and not the inside, like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on the other side as well. And I'm going to match what I did on the other side so that I start with coming in through the back and then back from the front again. So you can see that I'm symmetrical with the other side. All right, now that I've got these leathers woven through the mesh, I'm gonna take them and I'm gonna put them through the bottom holes. Like the scoop, there's 4 holes on the bottom. I'm going to take these leathers and put them on the outside to match what I did on the scoop. So I'm gonna thread those through. And I'm gonna pull them pretty tight for when I'm stringing. They can get looser later on, but generally on the outer runners, these outside guys, you're gonna want them relatively tight to help hammock the ball when you're cradling. So now we've set this up, the next thing I'm going to do is the top string. For the top string, I need one sidewall lace. I'm going to start by just doing a basic loop and through knot. Sometimes I like to double up and do that twice, just so that I can't slip through the top hole or the stringing hole that I'm going to thread it through. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to start from the left side. I'm going to take the very first stringing hole that's available and head through that. And then this part can be a little tricky, but I'm basically going to thread through that loop I made with the leather. Once I'm through that, I'm in the clear. And then this is preference, but I like to come through and grab underneath that, that second hole in. There's like a little loop sticking out. I like to grab that to try to help make it tight, because when you're stringing a top string, your goal, just like it is with like a men's head, is to make it as tight as possible, or get the mesh as tight as possible to the scoop. And so I'm going to try to grab everything I can. This next part, I'm going to come in through the, I haven't touched this third mesh hole yet, but I'm just going to come in through the back side of the scoop with the sidewall string. And then I'm going to come back through the third mesh hole. So I've got my first one here, grabbed by the leather. The second one is right here, and the third one I'm going to grab right here. I'm going to come through the front side, weave it through, and I'm going to make sure that this loop I just made from putting it through the back side of the scoop, I'm actually on the inside of that, so that when I pull it tight, I'm overlapping. And so I'm going to pull that really tight. And then I'm going to do the opposite of what I just did. Instead of coming through the scoop, I'm going to come back through the mesh. Now I'm on the front side of the stick. I'm going to come through the front side of the scoop. It's going to make that knot. And now heading over to the next one, I'm going to do what I did before and try to grab the top part of this hole. And now I'm going to go ahead and do what I did on the last, that last hole. I'm now on the fifth hole. I'm going to come through the back of the scoop, come through the front of the mesh, pull that tight, and then like before, come through the back of the mesh before I ever touch the scoop, and then come through the front of the scoop. This makes a loop. I'm going to go through that loop, and I'm going to pull that really tight. And then I'm just going to do what I've been doing and come through the top of this mesh part to try to add a little tension to that column of mesh. And then I got to get through this leather loop. And then I'm going to finish off by heading through the top stringing hole that matches the side I came in from. And I'm going to do the same knot. I'm going to make a loop and then cross back through it. And I'm going to try to string that as tight as I can. And like I said on the other side, sometimes I like to come through and do a second one. And that just helps prevent the string from slipping through the hole. All right, now I'm going to start with the sidewall strings. So I'm going to take a sidewall lace, another loop and through knot. And I like to start a little lower so that I have another hole I can come back through with a shooting string later. So I'm going to take the third stringing hole from the top, come through from the outside, and then I'm just going to do a bunch of these. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just coming in from the outside of the sidewall hole, and then coming up through the loop I've made. So when I come through, there's a big loop of string, and I'm gonna come through on this side. So I'm stringing these not super tight, but moderately tight. I'm still gonna have to get a string through here later, so it's easy to leave a little slack. And I'm kind of just alternating every other stringing hole. I like having at least one that's open here so that I can come back through with a U shooter later. And then I'm just gonna wrap this up. You just come through from the inside of the sidewall. So the string's on the outside, and now I can just tie another knot. And we're all set. Now I'm gonna repeat that on the other side. You definitely want to make sure that you're matching what you've done on the other side of the head. So I'm always trying to stay symmetrical as I go along here. So if we've made it to this point, one of the last major things we need to do is tie these leathers to the sidewall. And so I'm going to use a cross lace string to do that. That's going to be this narrow string. It's kind of smooth and slick. And like before, I'm going to do a loop and through knot to give myself a little bit of extra at the end in case I want to come back and add some slack later. So I'm actually going to come in through that same first hole that I put the top string through. I should have enough room to thread this through. And now I've got this string through here. I'm gonna come across and I'm just gonna grab through this, every junction where the row of 7 went through the leather, those are the ones I'm gonna loop through. So I'm putting my string through the mesh and coming around. Crossing it over, it looks like this. Just a typical traditional cross lace. What I like to do for these upper ones, since there's a lot of room for these to slide around and you need this part of your pocket to be pretty structured and stable, I like to double up, and so I'm gonna come in from the front side on the second one. Same hole. Make a knot that looks like that. And I want this to be pretty tight so that the ball doesn't hit the scoop or get caught up under the scoop on release. And so I'm gonna do that for probably the first 3. So that's the first one, I'll do it on these ones. And then once I get down to here, I'm just gonna go through and back out and keep it moving. So I'm gonna head over to the sidewall and go through the first loop I made. In through the back, and I'll come back. I've got this overlap right here. And then I'm gonna head back over to the mesh, and we're just gonna zigzag our whole way down. So I'm gonna do what I did before, last time I was at the mesh. Pull it through, I got that overlap, but I'm gonna come back through again from this front side. Make a nice knot like that. And then back to the sidewall again. And the whole time I'm doing this, I'm trying to keep like a decent amount of tension here. Like I don't want it to be super tight so that it's pulling the mesh over a whole bunch, but I want it to not be very loose either. And this is where I want the sweet spot of the pocket to be, so I'm going to start letting it loosen up a little bit instead of putting as much tension in it as I was before. We're just going to keep making our way down the head. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to stop doing these double knots and I'm just going to do like a nice quick loop. All right, now I'm down to the bottom. I'm just going to take this and head right out where I went with my sidewall through the last string hole. So it looks like that. I'm just going to tie this off, a little looping through. And now I'm going to go to the other side and do exactly what I just did on this side. To match, trying to be as symmetrical as I can be. Last but not least, need to do a bottom string. Right now the mesh is just kind of floating here at the bottom. And so I'm gonna take a piece of sidewall string and loop it through these inner two bottom string holes. And that'll allow me to tighten the pocket on the fly when I'm on the field, and also, you know, keep the ball from finding its way out of the bottom of the pocket. So I'm gonna take my last sidewall string, tie a little knot, and especially on the bottom I like to double up since those holes are meant to have a leather go through them. And the sidewall string is a lot skinnier. I'll use like a double knot like that. All right, so I'm gonna take my sidewall string and I'm gonna come in through the inner bottom string hole like this. And right now I've got this bottom row of 7. This is the last one that I threaded through the leathers. I'm actually gonna jump ahead of that one to this row of 6. So there should be 6 holes here. And I'm gonna come in from the front side of this outside guy right here. Come in, then I'm gonna go back out through the back side of that second hole. Come in through the front of the third, back through. I'm just gonna keep weaving it through that row of 6, staying in the same row. And I'm gonna finish. If you choose a row of an even amount of holes, then you can just keep it symmetric and go all the way through and it'll finish out the same way. So now I've got the string and I'm gonna come through this second hole, pulling that down relatively tight. And now the structure of my pocket is pretty much finished. I'm just gonna tie this into a double knot real quick. Pocket's almost finished. We just need to put some shooters. So generally I'm gonna do one straight across the top and then one that generally has the shape of an upside down U that comes through here. I'm gonna start with the one that comes across the top. So I'm gonna grab one of my shooters. I like to start on the left side and Like I mentioned before, I left a stringing hole open for me to just fit that right through there. I'm gonna take the other side and loop it through so they're both on this side. And unlike the rest of the pocket, I like to string the shooters from the front side because that's the part that's gonna be contacting the ball, and I like to make sure that it's all fit and there's no loose parts the ball can get caught up on. On this open part, I'm just gonna start twisting the string a little bit. So I'll probably just do one twist since there's nothing to really thread it through. And I'm gonna make sure that one of these laces ends up on the back side of this leather while the other one's on the front. And I'm gonna choose this row of 7 right here, the first one that the cross lace wrapped around. And I'm gonna bring this lace on the back side of the leather up through the front of that mesh hole. And then I'm gonna take the one that was on the front side of the leather and bring it through underneath of that opposing side. And so I'm gonna just get this nice twisting pattern. The one that's coming in through the front side of the mesh is always gonna be going underneath of the one that's coming in through the back. I'm gonna take one side and make sure it goes through that string hole. The other one's gonna come around this back side. And since this is the top one, I kind of want this one to be somewhat tight so that when the ball hits it, it doesn't just get pushed up underneath the scoop. I want this to kind of have some tightness to it, but not too much. So enough so I can kind of go like that with my hand. And I'll probably come back to the front and make sure that it's tight over here too, so any loose parts don't redistribute themselves. And knotting this, I like to take my 2 fingers, wrap around to make a loop, and then I come through that loop I made, and I find that that knot usually stays much better than crossing them and doing a box knot. And so I'm done with that top shooter. So now we're gonna figure out where we're gonna put our U shooter. I've left a hole open right here, which is a good starting point, but we need to map out where we're gonna have that thing land. I like to usually keep a row below, an open row below the top and the U. So I'm gonna choose this, this next row of 7 that I connected to the sidewall over here. I'm gonna choose that one as where the U ends. And I'm gonna have the U, for this one I think I'm gonna do 5 diamonds across. You could do 3, that would start approaching more of a V where it's a little tighter. I'm gonna use a 5 across. And so I'm gonna aim for this hole right here. So I need to kind of make sure I'm doing a straight line from here to this hole. And I kind of need to know that going in so that I can choose like which trajectory I kind of take towards that hole. So again, I'm gonna take my shooting string and place it through that sidewall hole. Wrap this one through like that. I'm gonna come back around to the front side. And I'm just gonna keep intertwining them. So I'm gonna go through there, up through here. In this gap right here, I can kind of treat these open spaces between these cross laces as if there are mesh holes. Just keep wrapping over top. So now I'm gonna jump over to, I'm trying to get to here. And so I'm gonna come down diagonally and start off on this hole right here that's going through the leather. So now I'm wrapping over top of the leather. jog up to the next one. And then now I am on that corner of my U right here. And I'm gonna start making my way over the top. So you can see the first half that I've done, and I'm just gonna come back down and try to make this look as symmetrical as possible by going through the same holes that I did on the other side. And then I'm going to take this guy and come through the inside of the sidewall, that string hole that matches with the one I started with on the other side. Pull that through. I don't want this U to be too tight, so I'm going to kind of run my hand through it the way a ball would travel through it. But I don't want to be too loose either. And I'm going to do the same knot that I did before, where I take the two laces, wrap them around, and then come through. All right, so I'm just gonna go through and cut all these loose laces. I usually like to leave like just a little bit, maybe like an inch, inch and a half on each of these, just in case I ever need to come back. So I'm just gonna go through and trim these up. This is all preference. That one looks a little long, it's a little long. All right, so I'm all trimmed up, and if I leave these just cut as they are, they're gonna fray apart and eventually your knots will come undone. So you're gonna wanna take a lighter to singe the ends of these strings. But overall, you're just trying to give them just a quick little touch, not too much. Make sure you don't get the flame too close to the pocket. All right, some people like to tie these leathers up. I'm just gonna tie them into a quick little cross. Otherwise, you can tie them into a knot and trim them off if you don't want to have all this extra loose leather hanging around. And these tend to come undone a lot, so it's nice just to tie them into a knot and get rid of it. But I know a lot of people like to fashion them up like that. And there you have it, all done.